Hello and welcome to a special programme this half hour dedicated to the Indian election. Standing by for us live in New Delhi, our correspondents Pavni Mittal with the BJP, Navedita Kumari at the headquarters of the Congress Party. Also with us live today is Irfan Nuruddin. He's the director at the Atlantic Council's South Asia Centre. Welcome to you. And with me here in the studio, Leela Jacinto as well, France 24's India
Hello, do you hear
expert.
me?
We hear you very well. Thanks for joining us.
I'm not connected.
So the results are coming in thick and fast as Narendra Modi seeks a third term in power. Indeed, this election has been seen as a referendum on his past decade as India's Prime Minister. And although the count is ongoing, a picture is starting to emerge. So far, it's not the landslide that Modi and his BJP were hoping for. The BJP is expected to retain power, but the opposition Congress Party has done better than expected, and thus Modi's majority could well be far smaller than forecast. Well, let's show you the early results as we have them for the moment. This was according to the figures from around half an hour ago, and it shows that Modi's party, the BJP, have 239 seats. A reminder for you that to get a majority in the lower house of the Indian Parliament, a party needs 272. And before this election, the BJP were saying their aim was to get a whole 400 seats. At least for the moment, the BJP looking rather far away from that goal. Now, a short while ago, Modi himself took to the platform X, claiming that he and his allies are victorious in the election, even though vote counting is ongoing. We've had that voiced. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
People have placed their faith in NDA for a third consecutive time. This is a historical feat in India's history.
Well, let's go live then to the headquarters of the BJP in New Delhi. Pavni Mittal is our correspondent. She's there with me now. Pavni, just tell us a bit about the mood, because I understand the Prime Minister is expected to speak pretty shortly.
Good evening. Yes, in fact, a lot of people have gathered here waiting for him to come in. He's actually not coming here. He's going to be going to a neighboring building, which is why the celebrations and the party has moved outside. Now, speaking of celebrations and party, look, right now BJP and its allies are in a majority position. They have more than 290 seats as we know it. So, they have a majority, but it is a muted celebration specifically for people who weren't looking at this as a BJP victory or a BJP election, who were looking at this as a Modi victory and a Modi election. And that sort of image and that assumption has been punctured pretty badly. And even though the Prime Minister has gone on social media and will be coming here to claim victory, the fact of the matter is, at this time, it is clear there will be a sort of coalition government. And if it is with the BJP, then we don't even know if Prime Minister Modi will be Prime Minister, because in 20 years that he's been in electoral politics, he's never dealt with coalition partners when he's been, up for the top job, whether it was when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat state in Western India or as Prime Minister. In fact, his whole image has been that of a strong leader who is loved and supported by all. So a lot of hopes dashed over here today. So muted celebrations.
Pavni, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's get the perspective now from the headquarters of the opposition Congress Party. Our correspondent Navedita Kumari is there. And Navedita, look, you heard Pavni there saying celebrations of a kind, but muted celebrations with the BJP today. What about where you are? What's the atmosphere like among the opposition?
Yeah, the reaction over here has also been opposite to that of the BJP headquarters. People have been celebrating here quite a lot. Hundreds of party workers gathered here, especially after the midday when the election results started to be clearer. Just 2 hours ago, hundreds and hundreds of party workers and people had gathered here to just get a glimpse of the party leader Rahul Gandhi and the president of the Congress party who had come here for a press press conference. They gathered here with music, they were dancing, and it's a very, very special moment for the Congress party workers because it's a surprise win for the party, especially in the previous two elections. Their performance was not well. In the last election, they only won over 50 seats, and now nearly 100 seats have been confirmed for the party. So it's a big boost for the Congress party and its workers.
Navadita Kumari, for now, thank you very much indeed. Well, at this point in the programme, I'd like to bring in our guest. Standing by patiently for us is Irfan Nuruddin from Washington, D.C., joining us, covering all developments from there. Just step back a little bit for us, if you can. How do you view these results compared to what we were expecting before today?
I'm afraid I can't hear you.
I'll let our technical teams try to... Can you hear me now, sir? I think, unfortunately, we're having some connection issues there with Washington. I'll let our technical team work on that. And I'll ask that question instead to Leela Jacinto, who's with me here in the studio. Leela, look, what do you make of what we're seeing at this stage?
Well, it's been surprises so far. I mean, nobody was expecting celebrations at Congress headquarters and muted celebration at BJP. It's so different from the narrative that we've had for the past 4 years and definitely on the election campaign trail. And the surprises are on so many fronts. Why has the BJP not done as well as they said they would? As you said, 400 seats, that was their rallying cry right through the campaign trail. And now we are faced with this scenario which we've never seen Prime Minister Narendra Modi in before, being a coalition man. He is not a man of coalition politics at all. And the Congress party's surprisingly good showing. They seem to have come out off the woods. And some of the things that are even more surprising are, what we are seeing in the most important state, actually, politically in India, Uttar Pradesh. This is the most populous state, which seems to be going very well for the opposition party, which goes to show that maybe the BJP did not run a very good campaign this time. I don't know if we have Professor Nuruddin.
Not yet. Not yet. The technical problems persist, unfortunately. I'm hearing there, Leela. But let's talk a bit about Uttar Pradesh then. You mentioned it already. Largest state by population in India, is that right?
Yes.
And it has, therefore, the largest Muslim population as well. And there is this expression, isn't there, that the route to Delhi, the route to power, runs through that state of Uttar Pradesh.
Exactly. All the big ticket candidates run from Uttar Pradesh. Prime Minister Modi has won his seat from the Hindu holy city of Varanasi. The head of the Congress party, Rahul Gandhi, looks set to win that as well. He's already won from another state into parliament. Look, the thing about the BJP's record is, so far from what we are seeing, it seems to be that the BJP scored too many of its own goals. It set up this narrative of having a supermajority of 400 seats out of 543 seats. This triggered fears with critics of Modi that the constitution will be changed, with a supermajority in parliament. And a lot of what we are seeing in Uttar Pradesh is actually coming out of this. One is the Muslims of Uttar Pradesh has a very large Muslim population. They are completely sidelined by the BJP. They were never going to vote for the BJP. The interesting thing that is happening in Uttar Pradesh right now is one of the regional parties that is part of the opposition alliance, India, is winning a lot of seats, very surprisingly. Primarily, I would say, this is a fallout of these fears of the constitution being changed. You see, the constitution of India allows for reservations, the Indian form of affirmative actions for Dalits. These are the very low strata of society. And Dalits appear to really fear a change of the Indian constitution.
Right, and that is something Congress have talked about, haven't they, during this campaign?
Absolutely. I mean, Congress stuck to message. It has a social justice platform, very much opposed to what the BJP ran on this year, which was very much a polarizing, anti-Muslim, Islamophobic messaging.
Indeed, and I am hearing now that I'm pleased to say we're reconnected with our guest, Irfan Nuruddin from the Atlantic Council. I hope you can hear us this time, sir. We've been talking a little bit here in the studio about the role that Muslim voters have played in this election, and particularly the campaign by the BJP that lots of people have seen as Islamophobic. I wonder what you make of that, and perhaps how that may be impacting the numbers that we're seeing coming out today.
The BJP's campaign in this over the last month really turned quite vicious. And there were two things that were quite different about it. The first is that for the first time, the Prime Minister himself was making campaign speeches that really crossed a line in terms of referring to Muslims as infiltrators, spreading rumors about what the Congress party would do in terms of seizing Hindu citizens' wealth or possessions and redistributing them to their Muslim neighbors, really stoking a pretty ugly kind of divisiveness. For most commentators, this both sort of resonates because it reflects a deeply held set of views among the BJP and Mr. Modi over the course of his political career, but also was a departure, because normally what they prefer to do is talk about progress, talk about development. And what that suggested was that those sorts of terms are no longer resonating on the ground. Remember that India's election takes 7 weeks. And so there's a lot of information percolating up to the parties where they're beginning to adapt their messaging. And I think the move to the communal rhetoric was a recognition by the BJP that what they wanted to do, which was to run on the record and to talk about a future of India that was going to be very, very, bright and development-oriented, simply wasn't ringing true with the mass public. And so they shifted to the anti-Muslim rhetoric. As Leela has pointed out, this simply didn't work. Arguably, it backfired. It might have been quite off-putting to a number of citizens for whom that kind of politics is not attractive. But it also really mobilized Muslim and Dalit voters, especially in a state like UP, to really come out and protect what they see as protections that the state has given them through reservations and other things. We don't yet have the data to know quite why people voted the way they did. It's early days, as tempting as it is to sort of deliver a complete verdict on what happened over the course of today. The truth is that we'll be sorting through the data for a while, but it is pretty clear that Congress has exceeded expectations dramatically, that its pre-poll alliance, which they label the India Alliance, really succeeded in reducing the fragmentation of the opposition vote so that the BJP was having to go up against a single major candidate as opposed to that opposition splitting the vote. And this has really borne fruit for the opposition.
If I may ask you a question, this polarizing anti-Muslim rhetoric, Professor Nuruddin, polls have shown this in the past, that the majority of Indian voters do not like this rhetoric. It does not go down well. So it's a twofold question. The BJP sticking with this polarizing rhetoric through the election campaign, and more importantly, what could this mean for the future? I mean, will this change the BJP's position? And also, the Congress position, the opposition position, was a defensive one. I mean, the BJP was making these Islamophobic claims about, infiltrators stealing the jewelry and cattle of Muslims. The Congress position was just, no, we didn't say that, but it was not a defense of Muslims. Are we going to see any change in this, getting the lessons of what's happened so far?
Well, that's a great question, Leela. I mean, part of it depends on what lessons these parties choose to learn. The BJP is what it is. It has always been a party of Hindu nationalism and of Hindutva. They wear that with pride. I don't see that changing. That would be fundamental to what the party is. A leopard doesn't change its spots, as it were, right? I mean, so this is who the party is. This is what they stand for. Even in the last 2 elections where they won, majorities on their own and big majorities with their coalition, the BJP nominated no Hindu candidates or Muslim candidates, whatsoever. So Muslims have been sidelined by the party. That hasn't changed. That's not going to change going forward. The reliance on alliance partners, though, if Mr. Modi is going to form another government, he's going to need partners. Those partners, in particular, the JDU in Bihar and the TDP in Andhra Pradesh, they have a different politics that they have to heed to. That's a much more regional and much more state-specific politics. They cannot afford to alienate Muslims in the same way. So maybe there'll be a bit of a tempering of some of that anti-Muslim rhetoric. For the Congress, I think they have a careful line that they have chosen to go. They've talked about social justice more generally. They've made Dalit politics, in particular, a central part of this. They promised a caste consensus should they come to power. Muslims are a critical part of that vote bank, but I think to talk about Muslims explicitly is not seen in the party's interest, because the truth is, while the majority of the population in surveys does say that they pride India's plurality, anti-Muslim sentiment in the general public runs deep. It is a social issue. The BJP didn't create it or invent it, and the Congress has to be mindful of it. So, unfortunately, I think regardless of the optimism or pessimism one feels about today's results, Muslims' marginal position in Indian politics remains, I think, a reality for some time to come.
Professor Nuruddin, thank you very much indeed. We're showing our viewers now live images from New Delhi, from just outside the headquarters of the BJP. Modi is there amongst his supporters. Jubilation there, celebration, as he said in that post on X earlier, he is claiming victory. Let's go back to the headquarters of the BJP. Pavni Mittal still standing by there for us. And Pavni, one of the things we were just talking about here was, given that it does appear the BJP hasn't done as well as it was expected to, it may well now have to form an alliance, some kind of partnership in government. What do we think at that stage that might look like? Do we know who might be involved in that? And how might Modi feel about that as somebody who's governed holding a lot of power for himself for an extremely long time?
It's going to be interesting, is all I can say at this point. There's going to be a lot of jostling around. You know, what's been interesting at this election is the first time you've seen two blocs sort of lay claim saying that, you know, we have a real chance. Because at this point, remember, the BJP doesn't have an absolute majority. So its allies might as well just cross over to the opposition. And we've seen this happen many times in Indian politics. In fact, the irony is that it's what's happened before state levels is that sometimes opposition parties have formed the government, and the BJP has then been accused of sort of buying or pressurizing its elected representatives to cross over, resulting in that government falling and the BJP, forming a government there. So if that happens the other way around, that's very much a possibility. So even though, you will have the Prime Minister stake claim to victory, the Congress has also done that. What you're going to see over the next few days is figuring out who can sweeten the deal for all these regional parties who now hold key. Coalition politics is not new in India. What we have seen and what is different is that for the last 10 years, you've had a party in power that really, for all practical purposes, was the party of two people. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his deputy, that is Mr. Amit Shah. And in fact, over the last few months, we've seen so much of the party sort of relying so much on Prime Minister Modi. I mean, a few months ago, India held the Cricket World Cup over there. The biggest matches were held in a stadium called the Narendra Modi Stadium. In January, when French President Emmanuel Macron came to visit, his rally with Prime Minister Modi was a sort of, him claiming victory, saying, I've put India on the world stage. When you have welfare programs giving free food and grains to poor people, those bags of grains go in a bag, with Prime Minister Modi's photograph on it. In fact, even the BJP's manifesto says this is the guarantee of Prime Minister Modi and has dozens of photographs of the Prime Minister. So you're going to see a lot of soul searching, and you're also going to see a lot of jostling, because alliance partners will want leverage. This is the first time that Prime Minister Modi will have to deal with that when he is up for the top job.
Pavni Mittal, for now, thank you very much indeed. I want to cross back to the headquarters of the Congress Party and speak to Navedita Kumari. But just before we do, I'd like to play everybody a soundbite from earlier on today. This is from the head of the Congress Party. Let's have a listen to a little of what he was saying, and then we'll bring those thoughts to Navedita.
The fight is to save the Constitution. I'll tell you the truth. It has been on my mind since the start, when the BJP cancelled our bank account, put chief ministers in prison, dispelled the party. It was on my mind that the people of India would stand together to fight for their constitution.
And Navadita Kumari with the Congress Party. Look, what Rahul Gandhi there were talking about is these complaints that bank accounts run by members of the Congress Party were closed down during this election campaign. They say effectively it was a crackdown on the opposition. Do we know at this stage whether that's had an impact at polling stations, whether that's had an impact on this election?
Definitely, the opposition parties and leaders have been accusing the government of using state machineries and constitutional institute to harass opposition leaders. And especially in the last couple of months, 2 chief ministers of different states, Jharkhand and Delhi, have been arrested after investigation against them on financial crimes or related financial crimes. So the opposition parties have been telling that the government is even using the Election Commission of India, which is supposed to be a impartial body and been given the responsibility of conducting a free and fair election, of ignoring hate speeches by Prime Minister himself and his ruling party in several incidences. And also they have been saying just now, as we heard the president of Congress Party saying that their funds were frozen, their accounts were frozen. So it had a big impact on this election. People, even when the national news television were not showing the anger of the people, but definitely today the votes and its result has shown the anger of the people against these crackdowns.
Thank you, Navedita. You know, a very important point, the democratic backsliding. And I have a question for you, Professor Nuruddin. You know, the democratic backsliding was very well known in Washington and the West. Do you think these elections and what the messaging, you know, has been so far is going to change how the West interacts with Modi? Because the West has pretty much let him go.
The West has, you know, I'm struck by how much things change in a year. Last June, Mr. Modi was on his way to Washington, D.C. for a state dinner and a state visit, being feted by the president, joint address to both houses of Congress. He followed that up in July by being the chief guest at Bastille Day in Paris. And now a year later, his party has really suffered a pretty significant defeat. It's easy to talk about the NDA alliance possibly being able to form a government for the third term, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the BJP on its own, Mr. Modi's party, had 303 seats in parliament. At current trends, that number is going to be under 240. That's a full 20% of their seats lost. Their national vote share is on track to be lower than it was a while ago. So to the extent that Paris and London and Washington were saying, listen, we might not like some of the stuff he says, some of the things that his party says, but he's got the national mandate. He is clearly the only leader for India. That narrative is punctured by what has happened today. And, you know, I think for a lot of the critics in cities, in capitals around the world that were saying, hey, it's important that we work with India. India is a critical partner for the 21st century. It's critical to our goals on climate change, globalization, a counter to China. But we have to really ask difficult questions of democratic backsliding, human rights, religious minorities in these countries. Maybe it'll embolden those civil society organizations, think tanks, journalists, to ask harder questions about India, even if Mr. Modi is able to come back for a third term in office. It just really does change the way in which I think lots of people are going to now think about what's happening in India.
Mr. Nuruddin, thank you very much indeed. We only have a few minutes left, unfortunately. I'd like to give those few minutes, if I may, to you, Leela, with me here in the studio. Look, as I've said, counting is still underway, but this does look like this was not the result, not only clearly that Modi didn't want, but one that pollsters weren't expecting either. Can you just give us a sense what the next few days, few weeks are going to look like now in India? I don't know, trying to form a coalition government. What are we looking at in high politics right now?
Possibly a lot of coalition talks. If the opposition were to try to form government, that would mean a lot of sharing between very many different political parties. The opposition has beaten all the expectations of staying united. You know, they divided the seats running for this election in a way, and they held it together in a way that really surprised people. That will come under strain should they have to form a government. And if the BJP has to get into coalition, its two biggest parties, they have substantial, very experienced leaders of these parties. You know, they're not doormats. The BJP that's not its style of negotiating with its partners. But one final thing. I mean, we were talking about how this election was not really free and fair, and the fact that we are seeing all these nuances right now is really testimony to the fact that, the voters spoke, and to civil society and independent journalists really did their bit. I mean, in India, the mainstream media is mostly owned by big industrialists who are close to Modi, and they kept that line. But, the message came out from independent journalists, YouTube influencers, and in a way, it has shown the strength of Indian democracy despite all the odds, the onslaught that it had.
Right, I think that's a good moment to leave our special programme here. Thank you very much indeed. Leela Jacinto with me here in the studio. Professor Nuruddin joining us from Washington, D.C. and our correspondents as well, Navadita Kumari at the headquarters of the Congress Party and Pavni Mittal at the headquarters of the BJP. Thanks to all of you, and thanks to our viewers as well for watching this special half hour focused on the Indian elections.